At dinner, my father told me, "What does it feel like to be a failure without a wife and without—" My dad didn't raise his voice. That's the part that still messes with me. He smiled, lifted his glass, looked directly at me across a table full of people and said, "So, what does it feel like to be a failure without a wife and without—" He paused. Not because he forgot the rest, but because he wanted everyone leaning in. The room went quiet in that weird, fake way it does when something goes wrong, but no one knows how to react yet. Forks hovered mid-air. Someone coughed. My aunt laughed too loudly, like she thought this was a joke and wanted to help it land. I didn't hear the rest of the sentence. Not because he didn't finish it, but because my brain shut off right there. Failure. Without a wife. Without— I felt my face get hot. Not embarrassed hot. That slow, burning heat that crawls up your neck when you realize you're being humiliated on purpose. This was supposed to be a normal family dinner. Nothing fancy. Just one of those everyone's in town nights. A long table, mismatched chairs, wine glasses my mom only brings out for guests she wants to impress. I was already on edge walking in. I'm 28. Single. No kids. No ring. No dramatic breakup story to soften the blow. I work a solid job. I pay my rent. I show up on time. I'm fine. But in my family, fine is invisible. My dad sat at the head of the table like he always does, straight-backed, confident, the kind of man people listen to without questioning, successful, married for over 30 years. The type who believes life is a checklist, and if you're behind schedule, that's a personal failure. I should have known something was coming. He'd been making little comments all night. So, still living alone? Anyone special yet? You know, your cousin just got engaged. I brushed them off. I always do. I've gotten really good at smiling while swallowing the discomfort whole. But this time he decided to perform it. I looked at my mom. She didn't look back. She was suddenly very interested in adjusting the napkins. My brother stared at his plate. No one defended me. No one said, "Hey, that's not okay." And the worst part? Everyone already knew this version of him. This wasn't new. It was just finally my turn. I felt this pressure in my chest, like my lungs forgot how to work. I wanted to disappear, or scream, or laugh it off like it didn't hurt. Instead, I froze. My dad took a sip of wine, totally relaxed, like he hadn't just cracked something open inside me. "Well," he said, tilting his head, "I'm genuinely curious. Genuinely curious." I wanted to ask him what it felt like to build a life so rigid that anyone who didn't copy it exactly was considered a disappointment. I wanted to ask him why success only counted if it looked like his version. But all I could manage was a weak smile and a shrug. "I'm doing okay," I said. The words tasted like ash. He chuckled. "Okay isn't exactly winning, is it?" Some people laughed again. Nervous laughter. The kind people use to survive awkwardness, not because something's funny. I stared at my plate and suddenly remembered being 8 years old, bringing home a report card with all A's and 1 B. "You can do better," he'd said. I remembered being 16, quitting piano because I hated it. "Successful people don't quit," he'd said. I remembered being 22, telling him I didn't want to move back home after college. "You'll regret that," he'd said. This wasn't one comment. This was a lifetime of them, finally distilled into one sentence. Failure. Without a wife. Without— I excused myself to the bathroom a few minutes later, locking the door and sitting on the edge of the tub because my legs felt like jelly. I stared at my reflection. My eyes looked glassy, distant, like I was watching someone else live my life. I told myself not to cry. Not here. Not over him. But my chest hurt, like I'd been carrying something heavy for years and someone finally dropped it right on my heart. I realized something sitting there in that bathroom, listening to muffled laughter through the door. This wasn't about marriage, or success, or timing. This was about control, and for the first time in my life, I wondered, what would happen if I stopped trying to earn his approval? Because something in me knew, deep down, no matter what I accomplished, no matter who I loved, no matter how hard I tried, he was always going to see me as unfinished. And that realization, that was just the beginning. I stayed in that bathroom longer than I should have. Long enough for my mom to knock softly and say, "You okay in there?" in that careful voice she uses when she already knows the answer but doesn't want to deal with it. "I'm fine," I said automatically. It's the sentence I've said my whole life. The one that keeps the peace. The one that makes things easier for everyone except me. When I finally came back to the table, the conversation had moved on. Someone was talking about real estate prices. Someone else was joking about how fast kids grow up. My dad was relaxed again, leaning back in his chair like he hadn't just taken a swing at my identity. No one mentioned what he said. No one checked on me. That hurt almost as much as the comment itself. I picked at my food, nodding at the right moments, pretending to listen while my mind replayed his words over and over, each time sharper, heavier. Failure. It echoed in places I didn't want to look at. Because here's the thing I don't say out loud. I already worry about that. Not in the dramatic, I hate my life way, but in the quiet, late-night way. The way you lie in bed scrolling through social media, watching engagement rings and baby announcements and promotions stack up like proof you're behind in a race you don't remember signing up for. I've always been a late bloomer. Or maybe just a different bloomer. I moved out later than my friends. I dated seriously later. I chose stability over passion more times than I want to admit. And even though I like my life most days, I still carry this low-grade fear that I'm missing something. That I'm doing it wrong. My dad knew that. He's always known exactly where to press. When dinner finally ended, people hugged goodbye in that shallow, performative way families do after uncomfortable gatherings. My aunt told me, "Don't take him seriously. That's just how he is." My brother squeezed my shoulder like that counted as support. My parents walked me to the door. My dad didn't apologize. He clapped me on the shoulder and said, "You know, I just want the best for you." I nodded. Because I always do. The drive home felt endless. Red lights, empty streets, my phone buzzing with group chat messages I didn't have the energy to open. When I got to my apartment, I kicked off my shoes and sat on the floor with my back against the couch, staring at nothing. And that's when the memories started coming uninvited, loud, relentless. I remembered being 10, telling my dad I wanted to be a writer. "What's the backup plan?" he asked. I remembered being 15, crying because my boyfriend cheated on me. "Choose better next time," he said. I remembered being 25, getting a promotion at work and calling him, excited. "What's the salary?" he asked. "Nothing else." "No, I'm proud of you." "No, you worked hard." Just numbers, outcomes, results. Love, in our house, was conditional. You earned it by performing correctly. And marriage? Marriage was the ultimate proof that you'd won. Someone chose you. Someone validated you. Someone made you respectable. I realized, sitting there on my apartment floor, that my dad didn't just insult me at dinner. He confirmed my worst fear. That in his eyes, I was unfinished, unchosen, unsuccessful. And the part that scared me most? A part of me still wanted his approval. I hated that. I hated that at 28 years old, one sentence from him could unravel me like this. That I could be independent, self-sufficient, emotionally aware, and still feel like a small child begging to be seen. Around midnight, my phone rang. It was my mom. I almost didn't answer, but I did. I always do. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey." There was a pause. Then, "Your father didn't mean to hurt you." I closed my eyes. "He said exactly what he meant," I replied. "He worries about you," she insisted. "He wants you to be secure." "I am secure," I said, "just not in the way he understands." She sighed. "You know how he grew up." That sentence. The universal excuse. "I know," I said quietly. "But knowing doesn't make it hurt less." She didn't respond to that. Instead, she said, "Maybe you should try to see things from his perspective." That's when something shifted in me. Because I suddenly realized, I've spent my entire life seeing things from his perspective. I've bent myself into shapes that made sense to him, measured my progress using his ruler, quietly swallowed my own definitions of happiness because they didn't align with his. And it still wasn't enough. After we hung up, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling hollow. And for the first time, a thought crept in that scared me more than his judgment. What if the version of success I've been chasing was never mine to begin with? What if I wasn't behind? What if I was just walking in a different direction? I didn't have answers that night. Just a growing awareness that something had cracked open. That dinner wasn't just humiliating. It was a mirror. And whether I liked it or not, it forced me to confront a truth I'd been avoiding for years. I couldn't keep living my life trying to prove something to someone who would never be satisfied. Something was going to have to change. And soon. I didn't talk to my dad for 3 weeks after that dinner. Not intentionally. Not in a dramatic "I'm cutting you off" way. I just stopped reaching out. And for the first time in my life, he didn't chase me. No follow-up call. No, "Did I upset you?" text. No awkward apology disguised as advice. The silence was loud. It gave me too much time to think. I started noticing how deeply his voice had embedded itself in my head, how every decision I made ran through this invisible filter of, would Dad approve, even when he wasn't around? What I wore, where I lived, who I dated. How ambitious I was allowed to be without looking selfish. It was exhausting. One night, after a particularly long day at work, I opened an old box I'd been hauling around apartment to apartment for years, the one filled with random keepsakes I never had the heart to throw away. Inside were notebooks, old journals, half-finished poems, printouts of short stories I'd written in college and never shown anyone. I sat on the floor, flipping through them, my chest tightening. I had forgotten how much I loved writing. How alive it used to make me feel. I remembered telling my dad once that I wanted to try freelancing full-time. "That's not a real career," he'd said. "You need stability." So I chose stability. And quietly mourned the version of me that didn't. A few days later, my dad called. I stared at his name on my phone for a full 30 seconds before answering. "Hello?" "Hey," he said, like nothing was wrong. "Your mom said you've been distant." I laughed softly. "I've been quiet." "Well," he said, "you shouldn't hold on to resentment. It's not productive." I felt something tighten in my chest. "Neither is public humiliation," I replied. He sighed. You're still on that? Still on that. As if it were a phase. As if it wasn't something that rearranged how I saw him. I need to talk to you, I said. Not like we usually do. Really talk. There was a pause. Then, fine. Come by tomorrow. I didn't sleep that night. I rehearsed everything I wanted to say, every hurt, every memory, every way he'd made me feel small. But when I sat across from him the next day, all of that dissolved into something simpler. I need you to know that what you said hurt me. I said, deeply. He leaned back in his chair. I was being honest. I know, I said. That's what scares me. He frowned. You think lying to you would help? No, I said. But cruelty dressed up as honesty doesn't help either. He crossed his arms. You're too sensitive. There it was. The phrase that ends conversations. The label that dismisses pain. I took a deep breath. Dad, are you happy? He blinked. What? Are you happy? I repeated. He scoffed. That's irrelevant. No, it's not, I said, because everything you criticize in me feels like it's coming from something unresolved in you. His jaw tightened. I did what I was supposed to do, he snapped. I married young. I provided. I stayed. I didn't chase fantasies. And are you happy? I asked again, quietly. Silence. Real silence this time. He looked away. And that's when the twist hit me, not like a lightning bolt, but like a slow, sinking realization. My father didn't build his life because he wanted it. He built it because he thought he had to. I didn't get the luxury of freedom, he said finally. I had responsibilities. I nodded. I know. And now you're just floating, he said. No direction, no commitment. I swallowed. Or maybe I'm choosing differently. He looked at me, then really looked at me. And for the first time, I saw something beneath the authority and criticism. Regret. Not loud. Not confessed. But present. You think you're brave? He said, walking away from the life people expect? I met his gaze. I think I'm honest. He shook his head. That kind of honesty costs you. I know, I said. But pretending costs more. We sat there in heavy silence. He didn't apologize, but he didn't insult me either. And weirdly, that felt like progress. As I drove home, I realized something that unsettled me. My father wasn't my enemy. He was my warning. A man who followed every rule and still felt entitled to judge anyone who didn't. And I knew, deep in my bones, that if I kept living my life for his approval, I'd end up resenting myself the way he resented his own choices. That night, I opened my laptop and started writing again. Not for money. Not for validation. Just for me. And for the first time in years, it felt like breathing. I didn't know where this path would lead. I didn't know if it would ever look like success to him. But I knew one thing with absolute clarity. I wasn't going to let someone else's regrets become my future. And that realization? That was the real turning point. Something changed after that conversation with my dad. Not in a dramatic, movie scene way. He didn't suddenly become warm or apologetic. I didn't feel healed or empowered overnight. But a line had been crossed. And for the first time, I didn't rush to erase it. I stopped calling him to share updates about my life. Stopped framing my choices in ways I thought he'd approve of. Stopped explaining myself preemptively, like I was on trial for existing. At first, it felt wrong. Like I was being rude, ungrateful, cold. Then it started to feel quiet, peaceful, in a strange, unfamiliar way. I noticed how much mental space opened up when I wasn't constantly rehearsing imaginary arguments with him. When I wasn't editing myself before speaking. When I wasn't shrinking parts of my life just to avoid judgment. I started making choices without running them through his voice first. Small ones at first. I signed up for a writing workshop on a whim. I said no to extra work projects that drained me. I went on dates without wondering how they'd look on paper. And then came the bigger ones. I turned down a promotion that would have doubled my stress but impressed my parents. I moved into a smaller apartment closer to the city instead of a smart investment suburb. Every time I made one of those choices, I waited for the guilt to crash into me. It didn't. Instead, I felt lighter. More myself. A few weeks later, my mom invited me to lunch. I almost didn't go, but I did mostly out of curiosity. She looked tired, not physically, emotionally, like someone who had spent decades smoothing over rough edges until she forgot what they looked like unpolished. You've been distant, she said after we ordered. I've been honest, I replied. She stirred her drink slowly. Your father is struggling. I nodded. I know. He feels like you're pushing him away. I thought about that for a moment. No, I said gently. I'm just not chasing him anymore. She flinched. You know he loves you, she said. I know he loves the version of me that fits his expectations, I answered. That's not the same thing. She didn't argue, which told me more than any defense could have. Then she said something I wasn't expecting. He's afraid, she admitted quietly. Afraid you'll wake up one day and realize you don't need us. I almost laughed. I already did, I said. I just didn't leave. I stayed and kept trying. She looked at me, then really looked, and her eyes filled with tears. I didn't protect you, she whispered. It wasn't an apology, but it was the closest thing I'd ever gotten. That night, I sat alone on my couch with my laptop open, fingers hovering over the keyboard. I'd been writing more short essays, personal pieces, things I never would have shown my family. I reread something I'd written weeks earlier. A line jumped out at me. Some people don't want you to succeed. They want you to conform. I realized how deeply I'd internalized the idea that love had to be earned through compliance. Marriage. Stability. Approval. Check the boxes or be labeled a failure. But what if failure wasn't being unmarried? What if failure was living a life that didn't belong to you? A few days later, my dad called again. This time, I didn't tense when I saw his name. "Your mom tells me you're making changes," he said. "I am. You're being reckless." I smiled softly. "I'm being intentional." He scoffed. "You're walking away from security." "No," I said. "I'm walking toward myself." He went quiet. "You think you're better than us now?" he asked. That question used to terrify me. This time, it didn't. "I don't think I'm better," I said. "I think I'm different. And that has to be okay." Silence stretched between us. "I worry you'll regret this," he finally said. I thought about the life I was building, the mornings that felt lighter, the nights where I fell asleep without a knot in my chest. "I already regret living for other people," I replied. "I'm not adding to that list." He didn't respond. And that was the moment I fully understood something. I didn't need his permission to live a good life. I didn't need his approval to be whole. I could love him, without letting him define me. That realization didn't come with fireworks or applause. It came quietly, like setting something heavy down after carrying it for years. And as I closed my laptop that night, I felt something settle inside me, not pride, not defiance. Relief. Because for the first time, I wasn't trying to prove I wasn't a failure. I was just living. And somehow, that felt like success. A year passed. Not the kind of year where everything magically fixes itself. The quiet kind. The slow kind. The kind where growth doesn't announce itself, but you notice it later when something that used to hurt doesn't anymore. My relationship with my dad didn't explode or disappear. It just changed shape. We talked less. When we did talk, it was lighter. Safer. No probing questions about my love life. No commentary on my timeline. At first, that absence felt strange, like we were both avoiding something obvious. But eventually, I realized we weren't avoiding it. We were respecting a boundary neither of us had ever named before. I kept writing. Not in a, "this will be my big break" way, more like a survival instinct. I started posting pieces online anonymously. Short reflections, raw thoughts, stories about pressure and expectations and feeling behind. Strangers commented things like, "This feels like my life. I didn't know anyone else felt this way. Thank you for saying what I can't." Every comment chipped away at something. I didn't realize I'd been carrying the belief that my experience didn't matter unless it impressed someone. One afternoon, I got an email. A small publication wanted to feature one of my pieces. I stared at the screen for a long time before replying yes. When it went live, my phone buzzed nonstop. Friends, co-workers, people I hadn't talked to in years. Then my dad called. I almost didn't answer, but I did. "I read your article," he said. My chest tightened. "Okay." There was a pause, a long one. "You didn't mention me," he added. "No," I said. "I didn't." Another pause. "It was well written," he said finally. Not proud, not emotional, but sincere. "Thank you," I said. Then, quietly, he added, "It takes courage to put yourself out there." I closed my eyes. That was it. That was the apology. Not spoken outright, but offered in the only language he knew. And for the first time, it was enough. A few weeks later, I went to another family dinner. Different house, different energy. At one point, my aunt asked casually, "So, seeing anyone these days?" Before I could answer, my dad said, "She's doing fine." Just that. Not a joke. Not a dig. Not a correction. Fine. I smiled into my glass, feeling something settle into place. Later that night, as I drove home, I thought about that unfinished sentence from a year ago. What does it feel like to be a failure without a wife and without what? Without validation? Without permission? Without someone else defining my worth? I think I finally knew the answer. It feels quiet. It feels honest. It feels like choosing myself, even when it disappoints others. I used to think success meant arriving somewhere, marriage, money, milestones. Now I think success is waking up and not feeling like you're running late for a life you don't want. I don't have everything figured out. I'm still single, still uncertain, still growing, but I no longer feel like a failure. Because failure isn't living differently. Failure is abandoning yourself to make someone else comfortable. And I'm done doing that. If anyone out there needs to hear this, you don't owe anyone a life they can brag about. You only owe yourself one you can live with. And that finally feels like enough.